I still remember the first time I laid eyes on Emily. She had this effortless energy about her, the kind that turned heads without even trying. Back then, she was full of life, always laughing, always the center of any room she walked into. It's funny how life can take that same spark and dim it, slowly, until you barely recognize the person you once loved. The early years with her were nothing short of magic. We'd stay up until dawn talking about everything and nothing at all. She had this way of making even the smallest moments feel significant, and I soaked up every second of it. At the time, I was just a young mechanic with grease-stained hands and big dreams, and she swore she loved me for exactly that. Or at least, that's what I believed. Fast forward over a decade, and our life had settled into a routine. Predictable. Repetitive. I had become the guy who left for work before the sun came up and dragged himself home long after the streetlights flickered on. The auto shop I worked at paid the bills, but it wasn't mine. Every extra shift, every callus on my hands, it was all for something bigger. I had this dream of owning my own garage, a place where I'd finally be my own boss. It was what kept me going. But dreams come with a cost. And sometimes, that cost is the connection you once shared with the person sleeping beside you. Somewhere along the way, Emily's smile had faded. I don't even remember when it happened. Just that one day, I realized it was gone. She was still beautiful, still full of life in her own way, but it was like watching the last light of a sunset, fading, slipping away before I could reach for it. I told myself we were just busy. That's what happens when two people build a life together but end up moving at different speeds. I didn't want to see it for what it really was: distance. Not the kind you fix with a weekend getaway or a date night, but the kind that grows like a quiet storm, stretching wider until there's nothing left but silence. I'd come home and find her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at a show she wasn't really watching or scrolling through her phone with that far-off look in her eyes. I'd mutter something about dinner, change out of my work clothes, and we'd go through the motions of being a couple without really being one. Our conversations became surface level: bills, groceries, errands, nothing deeper, nothing that mattered. I had learned to ignore the emptiness, the same way I ignored the ache in my hands after a long day at the shop. Date nights disappeared, replaced by her quick mentions of going out with her friends or needing some space. At first, I thought it was a good thing. I told myself she deserved to unwind, that she needed a life outside of our home while I was working to build something for our future. But deep down I knew. When your partner starts looking for life outside of what you built together, it's not just about needing fresh air. It's about something slipping through your fingers. Still, I convinced myself she'd come back. That one day, I'd walk through the door and find her waiting for me, smiling the way she used to. But life isn't that generous. The changes started subtly. She filled her schedule with evening classes and fitness routines, Pilates, high-intensity workouts, things she had never cared about before. She was excited about them, and I tried to match that excitement, offering a tired smile after a double shift at the garage. That's great, I'd say, though the words felt empty, just another part of the routine we were stuck in. Then, the outings got longer. More frequent. The nights I spent eating dinner alone outnumbered the ones we spent together. The indentation of her spot on the couch became just another reminder of her absence. I stopped waiting up for her. Stopped asking questions that I was afraid to hear the answers to. The weekends, once our time, became hers. Spontaneous plans, last-minute dinners, vague explanations. "I'm meeting the girls," she'd say, barely looking up from her phone as she grabbed her purse. And just like that, she'd be gone, leaving only the sound of the door clicking shut behind her. I told myself it was normal, that people change, that relationships go through phases. But late at night, when I lay in bed listening to the faint glow of her phone screen as she texted someone, always turning it away so I couldn't see, I felt something in my gut tighten. Something was wrong. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. The doubts started small, creeping in like a slow leak I couldn't quite patch. I told myself I was overthinking, that exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But doubt, once planted, has a way of taking root. One night, Emily told me she was going out for dinner with her friends at some new, upscale restaurant downtown, one she had been raving about for weeks. I didn't think much of it until I was mindlessly scrolling through social media, killing time before bed. That's when I saw it. A post. A picture. Tagged by one of her friends. Girls' night out. Laughs and cocktails at the loft. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. The loft wasn't the fancy new place she had mentioned. It was a dimly lit bar we used to go to years ago, back when we actually enjoyed spending time together. And there she was in the photo, smiling, laughing, looking more alive than she had in months. I told myself it was just a mistake. Maybe they changed plans last minute. Maybe she just forgot to tell me. But that uneasy feeling settled deeper into my bones. Over the next few weeks, more things started to feel off. Emily would tell me she was at a late workout, but something about the timing didn't add up. A post would go up too early or too late. A story would shift slightly when she told it again. They were small things, the kind of details that don't seem important until you start connecting them. I wanted to ignore it. I really did. Because acknowledging it meant confronting something I wasn't ready for. But then, her behavior changed too. She became more guarded, more distant. Her phone, which she used to leave lying around without a second thought, was now always within reach. Face down on the table. Locked when she wasn't using it. Late at night, she would lie in bed next to me, texting in the dark, the soft glow of her screen casting shadows on her face. I'd listen to her giggle quietly, the kind of laugh she used to save just for me. My heart would tighten in my chest, but I'd force myself to look away, to pretend I didn't notice. The space between us wasn't just emotional anymore, it was physical. She barely touched me. The kisses were quick, almost out of obligation. And when we did talk, it was polite, distant, two people going through the motions of a life that used to be real. I told myself I was imagining things. That maybe I was just paranoid because work was draining me. But deep down I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late when Emily came home, later than usual. I was sitting in the armchair, half watching some old movie on TV, trying to stay awake. The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my thoughts, and I turned just in time to see her stumble in. She was tipsy. Not falling down drunk, but just unsteady enough that I could tell she'd had a few too many. She kicked off her heels with a tired laugh, muttered something I couldn't make out, and disappeared down the hall toward the bathroom. I should have just let it go. I should have stayed in my chair, let her shower, let the night pass like every other night before it. But then, her phone buzzed. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, abandoned in her rush to clean up. I glanced at it without thinking, without any real intention, just instinct. And that's when I saw it. A message. From her own number. But it wasn't meant for me. Honey, I forgot to send you our video. I want more of this with you. There's plenty of time now, and so little of you. I went still, my pulse pounding so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear the sound of the shower running down the hall. My breath came in short, shallow bursts as I stared at the words, reading them again and again, hoping, praying, I had somehow misunderstood. That this was some kind of mistake. But then, my shaking fingers clicked the message open. And there it was. A video. I hesitated for a split second. Some part of me knew that whatever was in that video would change everything. That once I saw it, there was no going back. But I tapped it anyway. The screen filled with movement. Emily, in a dimly lit room. Not alone. The man with her wasn't just some faceless stranger. He was familiar. And what they were doing wasn't something I could explain away. It wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just an embrace. It was her. With him. Completely. My stomach clenched, my vision tunneling as the betrayal unfolded in front of me. My hands clenched into fists, my breath coming out in short, ragged bursts. It felt like my world had just collapsed in on itself, the weight of it all pressing down on me so hard I could barely stand. I wanted to scream. To punch something. To rip the phone in half and throw it across the room. But instead, I just stood there. Frozen. The house around me, the kitchen, the photos on the fridge, the familiar creak of the floorboards, felt unreal, like I was trapped in someone else's nightmare. I forced myself to set the phone down, my hands trembling. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of something that had no explanation. How long? Who was he? How could she? The trust we had spent years building, the life we had created together, it all shattered in an instant, replaced by nothing but raw, gut-wrenching betrayal. Somewhere in the distance, I could still hear the water running in the shower. Emily, oblivious, washing away the evidence of whatever she had done before walking through our front door like nothing had happened. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought it might break. I wanted to storm into the bathroom, confront her, demand answers. I wanted to make her look me in the eye and explain how she could do this to me. But then, something shifted inside me. The initial shock, the searing rage, it all dulled, giving way to something colder. Something sharper. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about revenge. I stood there in the dim kitchen, the silence thick and suffocating, the only sound the distant hum of the shower. My breath was still uneven, my fists clenched so tightly that my nails bit into my palms. The rage inside me burned hot, but beneath it, something else settled, a strange, chilling clarity. I knew that if I stormed into that bathroom right then, if I let my emotions take over, I would get nothing but lies. Excuses. Tears that wouldn't mean a damn thing. She'd spin some story, twist the truth until even I started doubting what I had just seen with my own eyes. No. That wasn't going to happen. If I was going to confront this, I had to do it on my terms. I took a deep breath, forcing the fury down, pressing it into something more controlled. I set her phone back on the counter exactly as I had found it, making sure there was no sign I had touched it. The shower was still running. She had no idea what had just happened, no idea that her carefully crafted web of deception had just been blown apart. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, my mind racing. The pieces were all there. I just had to put them together. The man in the video. I had seen his face before. I knew him. But from where? I replayed the image in my head, dissecting every detail. His voice, the way he touched her like this wasn't their first time. Like this had been happening for a while. And then it hit me. The gym. That goddamn gym. Emily had been going to her new fitness classes for months now. I never questioned it. Why would I? She deserved to do something for herself, right? But now I saw it for what it was. Not workouts. Not Pilates. Him. The knowledge settled like a stone in my chest. My mind flashed back to the time she had come home late, sweaty and flushed, claiming she had stayed a little longer to chat with the girls. How many times had I smiled and told her that was great? How many times had I kissed her good night, never knowing she had just come from his bed? I clenched my jaw, the cold fury threatening to spill over. But I held it back. This wasn't the time to explode. This was the time to plan. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make her regret it. The next few days, I played the part of the clueless husband. If she noticed anything different about me, she didn't show it. Maybe she was too wrapped up in her little secret to realize that I had one of my own. I started paying attention. Every detail, every pattern. The way she kept her phone close, the way she disappeared for hours without explanation. I wasn't just watching her, I was watching him, too. It didn't take long to confirm what I already knew. One evening, I left work earlier than usual. Didn't tell her. Didn't give her any warning. I parked a block away from the gym and waited, watching the entrance like a predator stalking its prey. And then, there they were. Walking out together. Laughing. I felt my knuckles tighten on the steering wheel as I watched him lean in, brushing his hand along her arm, the way she tilted her head back and laughed like he had just told the funniest joke in the world. The way she used to laugh with me. I could have confronted them right there. I could have stepped out of the car, walked right up, and ended it. But that would have been too easy. I wanted this to hurt. I wanted this to break her. That night, I set my plan into motion. Emily's phone had become an extension of her hand lately, but I knew her habits. Knew that after a few glasses of wine, she got careless. And just as I predicted, when she finally dozed off on the couch, her phone was right there, unlocked, screen dim but still active. I picked it up, my pulse steady. I wasn't even nervous. This wasn't snooping. This was justice. I scrolled through her messages, my eyes scanning for one name. And when I found it, my suspicions were confirmed. Jake. That was his name. And their messages. Explicit. Detailed. Full of things that made my stomach churn and my fingers curl with rage. They weren't just sneaking around. They were planning a future together. There it was, in plain text. I wish I could wake up next to you every morning. I hate sneaking around. I just want it to be us. Give me time. I need to figure out how to tell him. Tell me. She was going to leave me. For him. And she had no idea that I had just beat her to it. I took a deep breath, fighting back the wave of emotion. Then, with the smooth precision of a mechanic used to working with delicate parts, I started transferring everything. Every text. Every picture. Every video. All of it. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy her. The next morning, I played my final card. As Emily got ready for the day, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit, I walked into the kitchen, phone in hand. "Morning," she said, barely glancing at me as she poured her coffee. I didn't respond right away. Just watched her. Studied her. Then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "We need to talk." She froze, the coffee mug halfway to her lips. "What's wrong?" I pulled up the messages. Turned the screen toward her. Let her see. Her face drained of color in an instant. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no words came out. I didn't wait for excuses. "I know, Emily," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "I know everything." The cup slipped from her hand, shattering against the counter. Just like the life she thought she was keeping hidden. Just like us. Emily stood there, frozen, staring at the messages on my phone like she had just seen a ghost. The color drained from her face, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she looked truly scared. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then, after a few seconds, she tried to gather herself, wiping her hands on her pajama pants like that would somehow fix everything. "Alex," she whispered, her voice shaky, her eyes welling up. "It's not." "Don't," I cut her off, my voice cold, emotionless. "Just don't." I could see the panic in her face, the way her hands trembled. She wanted to explain, to spin some kind of story that would make this all disappear. But there was no story that could undo what I had seen. What I knew. She took a shaky step forward. "Please, let's talk about this." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Talk? Now you want to talk? You had months to talk, Emily. Months where I asked you what was wrong. Where I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Where I ignored all the signs because I thought maybe this was just a rough patch." I exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the counter to keep my hands from shaking. "But it wasn't a rough patch, was it? It was him. It was always him." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and for a split second, I felt that old instinct to comfort her, to pull her in and tell her everything would be okay. But it wouldn't. Because she had destroyed it. "Alex," she sobbed, reaching for me. "I was lonely." I laughed again, this time full of anger. "Lonely? Lonely? That's your excuse?" I was breaking my back at the shop, working my ass off to give us a better future, and you, I swallowed, the words catching in my throat. "You found someone else to keep you company?" She shook her head wildly, her sobs turning desperate. "No, it wasn't like that. I never wanted to hurt you, But you did," I snapped, my voice sharp as a knife. "You hurt me every time you snuck around. Every time you lied to my face. Every time you looked me in the eye and told me you loved me while texting him behind my back." Her sobs turned into gasping breaths. Her hands covering her face like that would somehow make this all go away. And for a second, just a second, I felt something close to satisfaction. Because now, she felt it too. The pain. The betrayal. The loss. But unlike me, she had no one to blame but herself. She finally looked up at me, her red-rimmed eyes searching my face for something, anything, that would tell her this wasn't real. That I would forgive her. That she could fix this. She found nothing. "Pack your things," I said quietly, my voice like ice. "And get out." Her eyes widened in horror. "What?" "You heard me," I said, stepping back, putting distance between us. "We're done, Emily. Pack your shit and leave." "No," she choked out, shaking her head. No, please, Alex, don't do this. We can fix this. I'll end it with him, I swear. There's nothing left to fix." My voice was so final, so absolute, that she actually staggered back like I had hit her. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed, clutching at her chest like she was the one whose heart had been ripped apart. But I wasn't going to comfort her. Not anymore. I turned and walked away, heading toward the bedroom. "You have until tonight," I said over my shoulder. "If you're not gone by then, I'll start throwing your shit out myself." I didn't wait to hear her response. Because I didn't care anymore. By the time I came back out an hour later, Emily was still standing in the kitchen, but now she was silent. Empty. She had stopped crying, and in its place, there was just resignation. She knew she had lost. Without saying a word, she turned and walked to the bedroom. I heard the closet doors open, the rustle of clothes being stuffed into a suitcase. It should have made me feel better. Seeing her leave, watching her world crumble the way she had shattered mine. But all I felt was exhausted. It took her 2 hours to pack. She tried to talk to me once more, but I just shook my head and walked outside, lighting a cigarette I didn't even want. By the time I came back in, she was gone. The house was silent. For the first time in years, I was truly alone. And I had no idea what came next. The silence that followed Emily's departure was deafening. For the first few days, it was like I was living in an empty shell of a home. The house still smelled like her. Her perfume lingered in the bathroom, her favorite mug was still in the dish rack, and the indentation where she used to sit on the couch was still there, mocking me. I thought I'd feel relief once she was gone. That maybe the weight of her betrayal would disappear with her. It didn't. Instead, it settled into my bones, into the spaces she used to occupy. I moved through my days like a ghost, barely speaking to anyone, just focusing on work. The garage became my refuge, the only place where I felt some sense of control. But even there, I wasn't free of her. The whispers started soon after. Small-town gossip spreads fast, and I could see the way people looked at me differently. Some with pity, others with curiosity. My coworkers were careful with their words, tiptoeing around the subject like I might snap at any moment. And then, one evening, I got a text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was spam, but when I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was him. Jake. The man she had thrown everything away for. His message was short, but it was enough to send my pulse spiking with rage. "I know what you did. You're gonna pay for this." I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. So, he had finally figured it out. The money. The blackmail. The quiet little revenge I had orchestrated in the shadows. I had warned him. I had given him one chance to walk away. But now, he wanted to fight? Fine. Let's fight. I ignored his message. If he thought I was going to engage in some pathetic text war, he was even dumber than I thought. Instead, I focused on work, letting my rage fuel me. Days passed, and the texts kept coming. "You think you're smart. You don't know who you're messing with. This isn't over." Each one more desperate than the last. He was unraveling. Good. I wanted him desperate. I wanted him angry. Because men like him, they make mistakes when they're angry. And I was just waiting for him to make the wrong one. It happened on a Tuesday. The garage was busy, the sound of tools clanking and engines humming filling the air. I was under the hood of a truck, deep in concentration, when I heard it. The screech of tires. The slam of a car door. And then, Alex. I looked up just in time to see him storming toward me. Jake. And he looked wrecked. Disheveled. Sleepless. Furious. He was breathing hard, his fists clenched at his sides, his eyes wild. The garage fell silent. My mechanics froze, watching the scene unfold. I straightened, wiping my hands on a rag. I didn't say anything, just stared at him, waiting. "You ruined my life," he spat, his voice hoarse with rage. I smirked. Did I? That only fueled him more. His face twisted with rage as he took another step forward. "You think this is funny? You think you can just get away with this?" I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "Get away with what, exactly?" His hands shook. "The money. The photos. The messages. You set me up." I sighed, shaking my head. "No, Jake. You set yourself up. You just didn't think you'd get caught." His nostrils flared. "You—" And then he snapped. He lunged, grabbing a metal wrench off a nearby table, swinging it wildly. He was sloppy. Predictable. I stepped back just in time, the wrench missing me by inches. "Jesus Christ!" one of my guys shouted, backing away. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Instead, I let him rage. Because now he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Within seconds, my crew jumped in, grabbing him before he could take another swing. He thrashed against them, but he was outnumbered, overpowered. And then, the police sirens. I crossed my arms, watching as the patrol car screeched to a stop just outside the garage. 2 officers stepped out, their hands resting on their belts. I didn't even have to say anything. They took one look at the scene, at the tools scattered on the ground, at Jake being held back by my mechanics, his face red with fury, and knew exactly what had happened. It was over before it even started. Jake was cuffed and shoved into the back of the squad car, still cursing, still struggling. But all I did was smile. Because I won. After that, things got quiet. I never heard from Jake again. Maybe he realized he had lost. Maybe the charges scared him straight. Or maybe, just maybe, he finally understood that he was never the main character in the story. I was. Emily never tried to reach out, either. I didn't know where she went, and I didn't care. All I knew was that she was gone, and I had no intention of ever seeing her again. And with that, I finally felt free. The past no longer had a hold on me. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, it was all just fuel now. Fuel for something better. Something that was mine. And as I locked up the garage that night, breathing in the familiar scent of oil and metal, I realized. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. Months passed. Seasons changed. Life moved on. And so did I. The garage became my sanctuary, my lifeline. I poured everything into it. My time, my energy, my rage. The betrayal that once kept me up at night became nothing more than a ghost of a memory, something that had hardened me, but no longer defined me. Jake never resurfaced after his little outburst. I didn't care enough to check where he ended up, but from what I heard through the grapevine, his life went to hell fast. His reputation was in shambles, his job gone, his social circle dried up. The money I had taken from him? A small price for the damage he had done to me. As for Emily, she disappeared. I don't know where she went after she left that day, but I never saw her again. Every now and then, I'd hear whispers, someone mentioning her name at the diner, a mutual friend bringing her up in passing. Apparently, life didn't turn out the way she expected. Jake had abandoned her soon after their affair was exposed. Whatever fantasy she had built in her mind about them running off together had crumbled the second consequences entered the picture. She tried to start over. New job. New place. But the weight of what she had done followed her. I wasn't the only one who saw her for who she really was. And as much as I wanted to say I didn't care, a part of me was satisfied. Not because I wanted her to suffer. No, that part of me had burned out a long time ago. But because it proved something. Some choices you can't undo. Some betrayals you can't come back from. And she had to live with that. Alone. My own life, though. It was better than ever. The garage wasn't just a business anymore. It was mine. I expanded it, hired a few more guys, started seeing more regular customers. The word spread, and soon, I wasn't just the guy fixing cars. I was the guy people trusted to fix them right. There was something deeply satisfying about that. About being known for something real. Something I had built with my own 2 hands. Something no one could take from me. Not her. Not him. No one. One night, about a year after everything went down, I was closing up shop when an unfamiliar car pulled into the lot. A sleek, black sedan. The kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this. I didn't think much of it at first, just another late-night customer, probably needing a quick fix. But then, the driver's side door opened. And she stepped out. Emily. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. Like life had chewed her up and spit her out. For a brief second, I felt something stir in my chest. Nostalgia, maybe. Then I shoved it down. Because we were nothing to each other now. She hesitated at the edge of the lot, as if she wasn't sure she had the right to walk any closer. She didn't. But I wasn't going to be the one to tell her that. Instead, I just leaned against the doorway of the garage, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, she took a deep breath and walked forward. "Hey," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. Just watched. She swallowed, shifting uncomfortably. I heard about the shop. It looks great." Silence. Her fingers twisted together. I wanted to see you. To talk." I raised an eyebrow. "Talk? No." "After all this time." She must have seen the skepticism in my face because she rushed on. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Alex," she said quickly. I wanted to say I'm sorry." I stared at her for a long moment. Then I laughed. A short, humorless sound that made her flinch. "Sorry?" I echoed. "For what, exactly?" She blinked, as if the answer wasn't obvious. "For everything." I shook my head, pushing off the doorway. "You're not sorry, Emily." She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off before she could. "You're not sorry for cheating," I said. "You're not sorry for lying. You're not sorry for sneaking around behind my back while I was busting my ass to build a life for us." She looked down, ashamed. "You're sorry you lost." Her breath hitched, her eyes snapping up to meet mine. And that was it. That was the moment I saw it in her face. The truth. She wasn't here because she regretted what she had done. She was here because it had cost her everything. And she thought, maybe, just maybe, I'd be the one person left who still gave a damn. She was wrong. I exhaled, shaking my head. "You should go, Emily." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. Not anymore. She lingered for a moment, like she wanted to say something else, but in the end, she just nodded. Then she turned and walked back to her car. I watched as she pulled out of the lot, disappearing into the night. And just like that, she was gone. For good. I stood there for a while, staring at the empty road where she had driven away. Once upon a time, I would have broken at a moment like this. I would have agonized over what could have been, what went wrong, what I could have done differently. But now, I just felt nothing. No sadness. No anger. Just peace. Because I had won. Not in the way I originally thought. Not with revenge, or blackmail, or making her suffer. I had won because I moved on. Because my life was mine again. Because I had rebuilt myself, piece by piece, into someone stronger. Someone better. And that was the greatest revenge of all. As I locked up the garage and headed home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something that had nothing to do with her. Something that belonged only to me. Freedom. And that was enough. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.